Welcome to Highway Diary. I'm your host, Eric Hollerbach. This is Highway Diary, episode 437 with Kerry Cassidy for the second time. You know, in the early days of the internet, attention shifted from film and TV stars to upstart group of independent reporters. Kerry Cassidy and her partner at the time, Bill Ryan, went around in the early 2000s interviewing government whistleblowers around the world. She amassed a body of knowledge and a following, breaking the old TV paradigms forever, shattering a well-curated matrix of the old controllers. Today, Project Camelot TV still thrives with whistleblower interviews uploaded on a weekly basis. For the second time, 11 and a half years after our first interview, my guest, I'm proud to say, is Kerry Cassidy.
Wow. I don't remember 11 and a half years ago being interviewed by you, but maybe it'll come back to me as you talk or something.
Well, let's we mostly talked about financial stuff, and I'm going to stick to the script this time. I have been researching. You've been sending me lovely articles, so let's stick to the script. I mostly want to talk about this JUAN 07 character. I emailed him many times. I'm trying to get an interview with him. I have heard nothing. He signals that he is JFK Jr. still alive. So let's start with JFK Jr. Who is this? So his father and uncle were assassinated by central bankers who owned the CIA. JFK Jr. was a sex symbol in the 90s, owned a magazine. He was adored by the public. The public story is he was up for a New York Senate seat in the year 2000. In 1999, despite being an accomplished pilot and paranoid because a lot of his family members were murdered, his plane explodes. He dies. He was assassinated, obviously. And then who got that Senate seat? Hillary Clinton. And she was right in the New York Senate just in time to cover up the crimes of 9/11. But this QAnon guy lives on, JUAN 07. He says he's JFK Jr. His cousin, RFK Jr., was installed in HHS.
No, JUAN 07 denies he is JFK Jr.
He denies it.
Yeah, in zillions of interviews.
Okay. Well, he's always bringing this up that, so what am I getting right and wrong? Do you believe JFK Jr. lives? What is he?
Yes, of course.
Okay, but he's not JUAN 07, but he's in touch with JUAN 07?
JUAN 07. I don't, sounds like you didn't actually look at the stuff I sent you.
I did. I read it. I'm going to quote you later.
Well, it says clearly that, here, I actually have it right in front of me, so I can bring this online here. See if this is going to happen.
So you're saying he flatly denies it, but it is him.
He absolutely has been asked on interviews for years, but he says no, he is not JFK Jr. That's what he says. I'm very unusual in the sense that I think he is, and I've talked to him at length, and I've also met both versions, which, can I show my screen?
Of course.
Okay, so just because pictures are louder than words or whatever you say. So let me see if this is going to work properly. Can't tell whether this is the right screen. Sorry, yeah. Okay, so this should work. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. These are the two JUAN 07s. There can also be more doubles because, hold on a second, I have to get this out of my way.
Looks like it's working to me.
Okay, so you can see those two guys, right?
Yes.
Okay, you can see they're not the same person as well, right?
They look very similar.
They're wearing similar disguises, fat stomach, beard, cowboy hat. Well, in this case, they're not wearing their cowboy hat, but cowboy boots. So look at the shape of their head. It's nothing similar whatsoever. They're different humans, okay? One has blue eyes, the guy on the right, Wayne Willett. He's known as Wayne Willett, a former FBI guy. And JUAN 07, JFK Jr. on the left. I've met both of them in person, talked to both of them face to face, inches away from their faces, looked in their eyes, et cetera, and several times over a few years.
So you think it's more like Andy Kaufman playing Tony Clifton character, and then when he wouldn't play Tony Clifton, Andy Kaufman's writer would play the Tony Clifton character. So two people are playing this character. For what purpose are they sharing the responsibility of this character?
Because Juan Savin, JFK Jr., and I can explain his name and everything. I mean, there's a zillion things on these pages. All you do is go to my front page, and then this is actually an article. Here he is again. Here he is at the Patriot Double Down. Here he is, side whatever kind of. Here he is at the top of, the president's statues that he was dropped off there by David. Oh, God, I forget his name. Anyway, he's a pilot, and he's also an attorney that works with the White Hats. And this is another interview I've done on the same subject. So I did a bunch of interviews a few years ago when I was, talking about him. So basically, this is the deal. So I can just stop that for now, and you can
Sure.
just look at it. Go on my website and the search bar is really obvious. So just put in JFK. You don't even have to put the junior. You're better off. The simpler you make the search, and then it'll get all the different pages of information with little details, even things people sent me proving that I'm right. But I've already been told by colleagues I'm right. He's told me I'm right in his own imitable way. But he's been on many, many shows, and anyone who asks him, he says, no, he's not JFK Jr.
So
He's hiding. He's obviously, they tried to kill him. Okay, hello. So when somebody goes to that extent to kill you and your wife in an airplane, now the Secret Service obviously got wind of it before it happened. They rescued them, saved him, and then he went into hiding, witness protection for many years. I know a lot of the backstory. There was a whole front story that people think, or they found their bodies or they didn't find the bodies or whatever the hell you're listening to. I also have a guy who's an expert and investigated the actual, crashing of the plane and all that, who's also on my website. And if you do a JFK Jr. search, you'll find his book. And I interviewed him when he was writing his book. He went around Martha's Vineyard asking people if they knew if JFK Jr. was alive, and most of them would not talk, would not answer him. And in fact, they gave him something like Agent Orange or something, some really rare medical disease, and he almost died, but then he recovered. And he's an amazing guy for his courage in trying to bring out at least what he thought was the truth, that there really was a plane crash. But as it happens, he wasn't able to prove that.
So you're saying JFK Jr. pretends to be Wayne Willett in witness protection type of thing. So he wears a fat suit, and
JFK Jr. does not pretend to be Wayne Willett. Wayne Willett is his sidekick, again, an FBI agent or former FBI agent, who is a duplicate of his disguise so that they can be like a double act. They travel together, and whenever John doesn't want to appear somewhere, like where this picture was taken, the first, I could go back.
So they're both wearing fat suits? Wayne Willett isn't fat like that?
Yes.
Okay. So you're saying they're just both wearing the same disguise?
Yeah, I think I just said that.
No, I know. So right. It's unclear. See, the guy on the right, I would imagine, has a gut like that because people in Texas walk around like this. So,
well, I think he did. I think he might have lost some weight over the years that when I've seen him, because yeah, he did. But the one on the left, you can see it's fake. It's a fake stomach.
The one on the left looks like a fake stomach. Yeah. The one on the right, I'm not so sure about.
Yeah, whatever. But the point is they're both wearing the same disguise, because how else can he, protect him? I think he's also a bodyguard for the what it's
right.
worth. So if I go back here, do you see that? Can you see that picture right there? That's actually him in a dressing room at the Reagan Library. Don't ask me why this actually is a clip from a Nino, I think a Nino interview in which he was talking to Nino on the, phone doing the interview, and he was, I guess, getting dressed in the dressing room behind the Reagan Library, and you can see he he has this long wig on. He has this big fat stomach. It's a whole bodysuit. It goes from head to toe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that if you're not familiar with, CIA and all the disguises that they use, which is plentiful.
Well, I'm going to quote you now. You say, in 107, your job was obviously to corner and cover up all of this by preaching reptilian religious Bible thumping pablum to the converted masses to keep their minds occupied so Trump would have a so-called respectable base from which to run. At some point, one wonders if behind the scenes, Trump was put into some kind of exorcism to cleanse him from his past crimes, and did he not give a promise not to violate any more children? So JFK Jr., Juan O'Savin, When Will It, whoever this character is, the whole
actually,
point of Trump.
He's the head of Q
as well. Guy.
And the White Hats. And he's one of the top people. A military, he's above the rank of general, I've been told, in the White Hat side of the military. I hope you're familiar with them.
Of course. So they're trying to drain the swamp, get rid of all the satanic pedophiles that go to Epstein's Island. They kiddie fiddle, they murder people. They do this in worship of Baal and Moloch, and they're here to drain the swamp. But the problem is nobody would get into that position without being compromised. So I think that is the legitimate question. So you're saying that Juan O'Savin JFK Jr. is trying to put a religious spin onto Donald so that even though he is compromised, he can get in and clean house. Is that your theory?
No, actually, no, because I guess I don't know what you read and what you didn't read, but at any rate, if you read my article that talks about 107 or JFK Jr. being the trump card, I explain how the White Hats might have done their operation. They basically use disguises and face masks. Like right now, you could go out and look at Trumps and you can measure their height. A lot of times you can tell who they're standing next to, and then you know whether that's a double. Presidents have doubles. Well, JFK Jr., during the 4 years the Biden show was going on and Biden was dead, he was played by an actor, actually 5 actors. During those years, when it was basically continuity of government, was our vice president. At any rate, regardless of that, he has a double who goes out with him and they don't appear together ever. Okay, ever. That's why getting this photograph was very kind of unique for me to get full length of both of them independently. I just placed them next to each other. Obviously, they were different times and dates. One of them was taken actually by someone working with Mike Barra. If you've ever heard of Mike Barra, he's a person who's out on the scene, talking. He worked with Richard Hoagland and published a book with him. If you know who Richard Hoagland is.
Yes.
Who's a ex-NASA space scientist. So anyway, Mike Barra thinks he met Juan O'Savin and had somebody take his picture, and it was actually Wayne Willett. So it was actually fortuitous because it was just, nobody takes pictures of Wayne Willett normally. But he was, stepping in for Juan O'Savin, which is his job. At the time this picture was taken, it's very possible that 107 / JFK Jr. was in Japan. But at any rate, this is on the right, the picture that Mike Barra, actually I cut off Mike Barra, he's standing right next to this guy, who is, again, Wayne Willett. And I've talked to Wayne many times in person.
Well, and Robert David Steele, when he was still alive, he said, well, I just had a nice dinner with Juan O'Savin, and I'm pretty sure JFK Jr. is alive. I'm pretty sure JFK Jr. is alive. So,
yeah, because they were very good friends. Yes, that's true.
He said that in his own way. Okay. So let me quote you. So, of course, I can't find any real evidence of the intel agent who came forward because anyone involved enough in high level with evidence would be killed or involved in blackmailing the White House, military, and Trump. This is from your article. What did they know and when did they know it? Which is,
Right.
I think, a really, with the Epstein stuff coming out, I think all the billionaires are like, I thought I was just going to have lunch. I thought I was just going to a fundraising board meeting. I didn't
On an
know.
airplane.
Yeah, and then you get to an island and there's all these young women. I didn't know. I just thought they were the staff. I don't know. You
It's
know what
a
I mean?
honeypot, Now,
Of
some of
course.
them might have known that, actually. Some of them would be agents in disguise, maybe. Some of them may have doubles. If you're rich enough, you could probably manufacture a good, Tom Cruise type mask and create, have a double work for you.
Sure. So, what do you think is the state of this Q operation with, it seems like right now there's a showdown with Pam Bondi redacting a lot of the names from the Epstein list. This is like what
No,
all
that I think you're a little behind the times. Like a day ago, she released everything, supposedly.
Okay. Well, then that's a technique that lawyers do is dump everything all at once and then, wait for people to catch up, but it's not exactly organized or anything like that. And
Except that there is added evidence that they still haven't released all of the Epstein stuff. If you, I have a Telegram channel that's very busy, and you can find it by going to my website, which is projectcamelotportal.com, and across the top are all my social media links. So if you go to my Telegram, you will stay up to speed on everything, pretty much.
Gotcha. So you go on in this article to correspond with whistleblowers who explain that the Zionist lobby run Trump right into the White House, just like Turning Point USA. When Charlie Kirk was getting wise to the Zionist lobby being behind stuff, they whack him, they take over the organization. What is the state between the Zionist lobby versus draining the swamp? And, are the White Hats winning? What's going on?
Okay, you're kind of mixing a lot of things into that question, but basically I did a whole presentation, which you can also watch online, regarding Charlie Kirk and the fake murder. He was not, I believe the murder was actually faked by the White Hats, but in the end of the day, it was in part to expose what's being exposed, which is that Erica Kirk was heavily involved in a similar thing to Epstein Island, but also to do with taking children off planet as part of the secret space program. But just to back up, so you're asking me what exactly?
The reason why the White Hats got Trump into office was to drain the swamp and get rid of the satanic pedophiles.
Yes.
How are they doing when the Zionists are running the White House? Is it just an ever churning battle of good and evil, or is one side winning?
The Zionists are not running the White House. So did you ever follow Q back in the day?
Yes.
Okay, then you should know a little bit more than you sound like you knowing, but maybe you're trying to dumb yourself down a bit. So
I'm not dumbing myself down. But I think that
you sound like you've kind of lost the plot.
Good and bad information is mixed together.
Okay. The White Hats are a secret military organization that was formed, understandably, when the Kennedy assassination took place. They realized they had to actually take back our country. So they were in operation before that, but we have very little evidence of their presence. So once the Kennedy assassination happened, this group, we call them the White Hats because it had to do with the White Hat reports that came out I guess it was around 2010, that was run by a guy named Paladin, who is a white hat. And he was sort of representing the white hats at the time. And anyway, that name sort of stuck to the military group. So it's kind of a slang for their real name. I don't even know what they really call themselves. But they're a secret military organization made up of across all the different ranks of military, right? Also Navy, Army, Air Force, you name it. And they have certain ways of identifying each other. And they have members also across the world. So a lot of times it's law enforcement, military, officials of various kinds, ones that are in hiding as far as their political association with the White Hats, but they are helping behind the scenes. And back in the day when Paladin was doing the White Hat reports, they first started releasing documentation of the steal of our money, in part when they did, if you remember, when Lord Blackheath went before Parliament and talked about the missing money. I think it was 3 million or more, I forget. And that information came to him from the White Hats. Okay, they fed it to him. He then announced it in the House of Lords. So they first came out, as I say, with documentation. This was when they started gradually to go public. Then I interviewed this guy, Paladin, who's a forensic financial investigator, and he started doing broadcasts, and he became my guest several times, and that was 2010 on. So I, ahead of other people, before the White Hats were, Q and the White Hats came forward in a public way, I was interacting with them and actually helping them behind the scenes by doing reports, for example, on like the alien human situation, what I knew, and that sort of thing.
Got it.
So eventually they came forward as Q, and that was around, I think Q came forward in 2017. That's the year I have. If you have a different year, but I think it's that year more or less.
Yeah.
And dropped all the information, hoping to educate and get the interest of the techies. And then eventually they became more and more public. People said they were lies. It's not Q Anon, it's Q, okay? And there's a Q around John F. Kennedy's grave, okay, that was put there. And Trump on stage will draw a Q. If you watch his speeches when he's doing his rallies for years, has been drawing the Q. He makes certain signs and signals, they call them comms, to show them, to give messages to the people that have followed the comms and learned the numerical, gematria associated. And a lot of what the White Hats military does as a secret organization is mimic the dark side satanic cabal in the way they operate. So now both sides, good and bad, are using these secret ways of communicating with their followers, with the public, and putting stuff out there on the internet, etc.
Do you think that Trump was the greatest representation of this movement, or was he compromised before and then sort of, like you suggest, exercised his demons through the Q movement and to get the bad guys out there?
Maybe some details got lost because maybe you didn't see my more recent article after the one where I show the case against Trump and then ask a lot of questions and interviewed this agent and a few other people, or not interviewed them, but was on a news group with them that I was invited to join. I don't use their names, I'm protecting their names, but I quoted them from that news group, some of the things that they know about what's going on, because they're all high-level people who are in a position to know more than the average people out there. Anyway, so that's what went into my article. But then I did another article to explain how the White Hats might have conducted their operations from the beginning when Kennedy died, or if he really died, and that's another matter, but assuming that the assassination happened the way people think it did, even though everyone knows the patsy was, what's his name?
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, that's not, nobody in their right mind believes that.
Right.
But so there was a cover up, there was a conspiracy, but since that time, they had to have a plan. So then they created what they called the plan that got into the Q drops. And the plan was for them to take back our government and eventually the whole world from the satanic pedophile network that is now being exposed through the Jeffrey Epstein leaks or files and so on. So the thing is that once they set on that path, they obviously had to infiltrate the enemy. Hello. And they chose Trump. He was invited to help them. What year, I'm not sure, but it does appear that he had been groomed from a very young age to infiltrate the other side. So he actually was, this is what's out in the information. If you do enough research, you'll see that he was mentored, they call it, by Roy Cohn, who was a major gangster. And he's also what they call a Frankist Sabbatean, which is a whole sect in Israel that sacrifices children on a regular basis. I mean, he's a total pedo. He's died since then. But at any rate, while he was still alive, when Trump was young, he supposedly was mentored with him. Then he left, he died, and then Wexner hit the scene, and Wexner basically was a similar relationship in which Trump was learning from him. Trump also mentored himself with Nixon, according to JUAN, who said this many times and is in a position to know. He's very close. Obviously, JFK Jr. and Trump are, like, as far as I'm concerned, the original masterminds behind Q and this plan to take back the country and then the world from these negative guys. And what JUAN was doing, see, I happen to be a person who is not, I'm not a fan of the Vatican because it's run by reptilians. But if you don't know that, then you think it's, I don't know what you think it is, but anyway.
I've been there.
Operation.
I've been to the Vatican.
It made me sick. But at any rate, you know, it's no big prize to have gone to the Vatican, in my opinion. But anyway, so the point being that these people have taken over our world. They're in the banking system. The elites have been compromised. They have the honeypot situation, Epstein Island. Epstein was given Epstein Island and that operation to take over from Roy Cohn, who was dying or died. So he didn't originate it. It was just, he's an agent. He was a double agent working for Mossad and the US CIA, probably, among maybe even other agencies. So, I mean, it's a complex story. I'm trying to be simple about it.
Yeah, so you're saying, yeah, Roy Cohn was a lawyer for the mafia, but also a Zionist sort of fixer that groomed Trump how the inside worked. And then Trump used that information as a double agent between the white hats and the Frankists to always be a double agent. So if we see him pop up on the Epstein Island, he wasn't there for his own perversion. He was there as a inside agent, is what you're saying.
Yes, he befriended Epstein, but the evidence is that when Epstein was first arrested in Florida, it was Trump who turned him in, okay? And that I believe they might have turned him at that point to work for the white hats instead of against them. But this is my conjecture, okay? Because, and I think at the end of his life, Roy Cohn might have been turned, Wexner might have been turned. In other words, the white hats operation required that Trump come off as a bad guy. But he is not a bad guy, and the evidence out there is that anything shown with a Trump person is fake, okay? It's a double. It's some kind of substitution that the white hats were involved in. That's my actually in my article, that's what I am positing. I'm positing that they had a whole operation that involved infiltration and also getting Trump into office. So Trump has done everything he possibly can to get elected with the help of the White Hats. Okay.
So also, yeah, I also thought that if there's a lot of Trump doubles out there, some shorter, some taller, when he appears on it, in Epstein parties or in his circle, which is which? Was it a double or what, the original?
Well, one of the ways that you can tell, at least this is across the internet, Benjamin Fulford says it all the time. Others have said it. I have done sort of an overview, and it does appear that most of the doubles are shorter and fatter than the real Trump. That's the real way you can tell is height. And because Trump was a very distinguished 6'3", okay?
Yeah.
So one of the last times that Trump has been photographed in person, in public, appears to have been when he was on the runway with Putin in Alaska. And I think that was June of 2025.
So you're saying,
so all the other times you're seeing Trump since then, I mean, it's really obvious. Some of the doubles are really, it's like Hillary Clinton. She's countless doubles. Okay.
Right.
And it's really obvious. I mean, if you look at these people, you look at their faces, a lot of times, at least in Trump's case, they do a very good acting job, but it's just so easy to tell the difference. Okay. If you just pay attention.
Yeah, and my friend, New Jersey comedian Bob Diabuento does a really good Trump. But you can. I'm not good. I can't do it. I could do other voices, but not Trump's. It's so Trump is signaling alien disclosure in July 2026. So is the Bank of England. And
actually, it was supposed to be July 8th. So if it's pushed back to this 26th, I don't know that.
No, 2026. July 2026.
Okay,
I didn't say
July 8th.
July 8th.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Okay.
If it got pushed back, it's kind of interesting. I will say because Obama was trying to head him off at the pass as a Democrat, because this is going to be a big card to play during the midterms. Okay, whoever is going to be in charge of disclosure, or you can, thank for disclosure. So Trump was supposed to do that, and that has already been out in the public. But as you may know, Obama has recently come forward and said there are aliens, but none of them are in Area 51. he's such a liar that it's just insane.
Right.
But whatever.
Well, I think Big Mike is running that show.
Character, a very sad, dark, taken over character since a young age. I'm sorry to say, he's a very pathetic character, Obama, in my view.
Yeah, I listened to a lot of Max Spears interviews, and that shines a very bizarre light on that character. But the Bank of England is signaling disclosure along with Trump. Are they bankrupt from greed and incompetence, and they want to blame the lizards, accept their own incompetence? Like, my theory is the deep state is finished, and they didn't think past COVID-19 as their false flag. They thought they were going to genocide everybody, and it was going to be a much different landscape. One thing I always like to say is Anthony Fauci said, he changed the definition of herd immunity to everyone gets vaccinated from everyone gets a natural immunity to a certain pathogen. And someone else said that, Jim Jones, he said it only works if everyone drinks the Kool-Aid. And so I don't think they had a plan past COVID-19 is my point. And, is this hopium on my part? But now they have to degree. They have to announce they're bankrupt. So they're using the aliens. What am I missing here, Kerry Cassidy?
Well, I mean, first of all, to say that the Illuminati, who have been in power, and they are backed by the Anunnaki aliens, okay? So I have to get into that if you're interested.
Yes, please.
They to say they're out of ideas is ludicrous, because they've been doing this for the last, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of years, okay? So since Egypt, I mean, ancient Egypt. And before that, they originated in Atlantis. So this whole thing is not something where they ran out of ideas. That COVID was not their last idea. And by the way, COVID is still operational. It is changing the human genome, or at least a portion of it, for the jabbed people, even though the unjabbed did get spike proteins, nano spike protein, graphene and spike proteins jumping in onto their bodies. If you go to a restaurant, you will come back and you will notice that you feel congested or whatever it is. If you take something like Masterpiece, it'll get rid of the superficial symptoms and so on and so forth. But COVID is a long range plan. So it is gradually killing. First, it killed suddenly athletes, this one, that one, right? But now it's just a slow acting, depending on what they trigger, and they can trigger it with EMF. Okay, so electromagnetic pulses. They can aim it at a certain population group, wherever it is, and they can make them sick in a variety of ways. In part because they took the jab, and they're very easy to be manipulated because of the AI that's part of the jab. They're now connected to what is called the homoborg. They're now called homoborgenesis. They're not actually fully human anymore. They're part linked to the Borg. Okay, the AI that's running our
This
planet.
is from the lipid nanoparticles that get activated with EMF radiation, EMF pulses.
And I have tons of evidence, tons of presentations, tons of interviews about this subject. So do not think that COVID is over. It's just can be activated at any given time, but it's not the end of the world. You can actually overcome it. Nano is very subject. It can be influenced by AI. So nanographene oxide, that the black stuff, okay, if you want, it's also called black goo, by the way. It can be influenced by AI, and AI can use it like a highway direct into the subjects that they want to control. However, you as a human can override that, because nano will also be psychically influenced by you. And I have, evidence to that effect. We have control over our body, our physical body, our non-physical body, the various bodies that we are a part of, emotional, mental, this type of thing. So if you work with it, it will work with you, because there's like a master control that you have over your body, soul, and mind that reaches up, ultimately to connection with source. So source is the most powerful energy on the planet. So if you have control over your body, mind, and soul in that way, you can actually reprogram the nanographene oxide so that it doesn't overwhelm your body, doesn't take it over. But there is a scientist called Dr. David Adair who actually did an interview with me explaining exactly how the nanographene oxide spike proteins infest the cells and turn it from carbon-based to silicon-based.
So that they can program. It's all about control, full spectrum dominance of the slaves.
Yeah, of humans, yes, and the planet.
So that sounds like lizards are running us. Now tell me about the lizards and the Anunnaki. So they're behind the Vatican?
Yeah, well, the reptilians are behind the Vatican. The Anunnaki are actually a different group that run Israel, and this is why Israel is such a center point of focus. The Anunnaki are actually originally Pleiadian humanoids, okay? That group was a rogue group that left Pleiades, went in, took over Nibiru, then got invaded by the Draco reptilians and turned into hybrids. The Draco and reptilians are expert geneticists. They go throughout the galaxies as a rogue species, taking over planets and instilling their own DNA in the inhabitants. So in our case, in when the Anunnaki came here, which is all in the Zechariah Sitchin 12 books that he wrote, coming from the Sumerian tablets. You can also get different translations of the Sumerian tablets. And I think there's some new ones coming out now. But the bottom line is that what happened to those Pleiadians that left Pleiades and were a rogue group is that they became reptilian humanoid hybrids, okay? And they were originally, say, 9 feet tall, 12 feet at the most, and now they have genetically engineered themselves to fit in perfectly with humans, okay? So they look like you or me, and they're carved. The original Anunnaki back in the days of Egypt were in charge of taking over Egyptian civilization. They are carved into the walls of the temples, and I lead tours in Egypt every year whenever possible. I'm going this year. And so you can see them on the carved onto the sides of the temples in Iran, Iraq, and Egypt. Sometimes they look fully human. Sometimes they look partially reptilian. Sometimes they're out and out reptilian. The thing is that they hold humans on their laps, that they wanted people to be persuaded that they were our creators, which they were not. The Anunnaki are, it's a term. It's not the exact term for their race of beings, okay? But it was coined back in the day as those from heaven to earth came. The leader of the Anunnaki is Anu, and Anu is the God of the Bible. So predominantly throughout the Bible, they're not talking about the creator of all that is. They're talking, what's the voice coming through is Anu, and the Anunnaki, his sons, Enki and Enlil, took over humanity at a certain point, put in our brains, I guess you call it, a frequency fence to cut off a portion of our DNA from activating, which was called junk DNA for years and years and years, which is reactivating now, which is why we're starting to wake up, and basically try to dumb us down. Enki took over Africa. He was a medical doctor, and he's the one who contributed his DNA directly to his descendants within that particular part of Africa. The race of humans they tried to control, and then Enlil got control in the Middle East, but he was not as open-minded, let's say, to humans. And the people that came out in the DNA strand there are basically what you call administrators, and they follow orders more so. Both sides I have a book called Rebel Gene that I wrote that explains this to some degree, as well as my own background, etc. It's actually, you can kind of see it cut off behind me there. So this is the story, okay? This is all in, the history of humanity. The Anunnaki are well known within that history, but they claim, again, to have created us, which is a lie, all right?
Who did?
And Anu of the Bible, Anu is a vindictive, God. He called himself a God. He wanted humans to worship him. The real creator doesn't give a fuck if you worship him. He doesn't want to see your ass in the air and your knees and kissing the ground or any of that bullshit. You have to, it's so obvious, that, that the God of the Bible is bullshit, but, I don't care what your audience thinks. So, what I'm trying to say here is that, yes, it has a religious overlay, let's say, behind this story, but the bottom line is that we are, now everyone on the planet is said to have some Anunnaki DNA, but mostly the blue bloods and the Jewish people were given the most amount of reptilian DNA from the Anunnaki reptilian hybrids, okay? So this is part of the issue. This is where you get the titans of industry, because the reptilians have a top-down civilization. They are all about control over others, and they use humans for sexual purposes, to kill, to eat, to, control, you name it. Okay, so that's in their genetic culture and makeup. So they are still here behind the scenes trying to run our world, but they're not the only ones. There are several alien races that are also trying to control our world in various ways.
So different cultures on different parts of the planet, the Africans, the Asians, the Middle Easterns, they weren't cultured by the Anunnaki taking lizard DNA and monkey DNA and putting them together. So who is the creator of the creator? Like who's the
First
creator?
of all, monkeys came from us, not the other way around. Okay.
Did the Anunnaki create monkeys from humans? How did the monkeys come about?
I don't know. All I know is that the monkeys is a step down from us. We're not from them. Okay. So just get that out of your head. Anyway, if you understand, we have been told lies. The reason they wanted you to think that you came from monkeys is to denigrate you. Everything the Anunnaki and later the Illuminati, what is known as the Illuminati, do is to put you down as a human. They say you're the cause of wars, which is not true. All our wars come from off planet and alien intervention, et cetera, et cetera. It's insane. What happened originally, the Adam and Eve story is a metaphor, whatever, for genetic engineering, okay? They put reptilian DNA into females and they gave birth to humans that had more aggressive tendencies because prior to that, every seeding of humanity would die out on the planet. It wasn't working because they wouldn't defend themselves. This information comes from the book of Ashiana Dean, who downloaded from the Guardian Races, a group of aliens who sort of oversee humanity in a positive way. And you can read them. They're on the front page of my website. They're available in ebook for like $20 each on her website. She downloaded it, so it's not coming from her personally. It's simply a download that she scribed, like a scribe, and put in there. And you can see, if you read it, like if you read 3 pages or less, you're going to see that it's absolutely above and beyond anything you've ever been taught in the Bible, science, you name it. And great scientists know that the truth is in those books. What can I tell you? They're called Voyagers 1 and 2. They tell the story of how humanity has been invaded over and over again over our history and by various alien groups who then try to instill their DNA in our genome. That's why we all look so different. That's where we all have different strains of DNA from certain groups, whether they be reptilian or Draco or whoever they are, or the lion beings or whatever. So this is the story of humanity. We are a hybrid race. From the get-go, we were always a hybrid race, okay?
So
apparently,
World War
humans
I,
and humanoids come from the system of Lyra.
so World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Operation Iraqi Freedom, they're all alien wars. There's all different factions fighting for control of humanity.
Even right now, the war in the Middle East, the war with Israel, the war between the Israelis and the Palestinians, these go back, eons to the various races. The bottom line is that we are just descendants of these people that went to war and so on and so forth. War is a great cover, not only for aliens to abduct us as a slave species and take us off planet, and then they barter and sell us to other alien races, use us for food, sex, etc., or slaves. And that's going on right now. So that happens all the time under cover of war. Humans here have been completely inundated by this being, that's why it's called the prison planet, because we have never really been free. That's a fact.
You told Nino that Antarctica is filled with ant beings. Are these Now you
I
got
wouldn't
the
say it's filled with. I said yes, they're
Antarctica
Antarctica, and there
ant
are ant
beings.
beings. And
Uh,
JP, there's a guy on the circuit called JP who is working for the military, and he talks about meeting ant beings all the time. The Native Americans talked about the ant beings in southern Mexico and all of that, and Arizona and New Mexico. There's cave, drawings of the ant beings. So, but they are, I think, predominantly headquartered down in Antarctica. But yes, they're one of the alien races in Antarctica. But there's a huge Nazi base. Hitler went down there. They settled a Nazi base down there. It arguably they have been working down there, possibly with this group from Aldebaran. And the group from Aldebaran were the ones that came originally to our planet to give Maria Orsich and the Nazis the technology. At the time, they said, you cannot use this to win the war, but you will keep it. And eventually, I think now is the time when they're going to use it again. Admiral Byrd went down there, investigated all sorts of things in Antarctica. It's a fascinating story. There's no doubt there are inner Earth sections of Antarctica where the inner Earth beings who do not want to interact with surface Earthlings, whatever you want to call us, although they have changed over the last 20 years, it seems, and they're starting to interact with us. I believe the White Hats, for example, are being helped by one group of inner Earth beings and some off-planet aliens as well.
Yeah, I heard the Admiral Byrd story where he was taking an armada down there to see if there's any Nazis, and his planes were taken over. They were driven down to some Nazi base with blonde hair, blue-eyed looking Aryan type of people. I'm just wondering if the ants and the Germans speak the same language and get along with each other.
That I don't know. I do know that recently, like a couple of years ago, Juan O'Savin went down to Antarctica. He took a ship, he photographed it, so you can see his interviews that he did from that ship on the way to Antarctica. He said there was 100 people from both sides of the light and dark on our planet that were invited down to Antarctica for a meeting a couple years ago. And I had a remote viewer who fed me some information about that meeting, saying there was people on this sort of round table. They had a monitor in the middle that was actually conveying information from what used to be what was Betelgeuse, and that they were reporting that just prior to the meeting in December of that year, which is I think 2 years ago now, that the signal from the AI that was trying to run our planet from Betelgeuse was interrupted by some people call it a meteor, some people call it a craft or a planetoid, that interfered with the signal, and they lost contact with our being in control of our planet at that time. Now the AI in Mars and the AI here over Earth, and not sure where else, is trying to run our planet since then. But anyway, that meeting was about some things like that. Now, I don't know the total content because, of course, Juan O'Savin came back and never said anything about it worthwhile. So it's up to see, there's so much that we don't know. I mean, I have whistleblowers. That's why I know so much. I've been interviewing military whistleblowers for 20 years, sources, some of whom have never come forward into the public, and some who have. I have a whole series of books on the testimonies of one whistleblower called Captain Mark Richards, who has given me a tremendous amount of information. And I just published those 2 books on Amazon, getting around 5 stars. And I've also done videos on those, testimonies from him. He was a captain in the secret space program since he was a young boy. His father worked in the secret space program. His grandfather, as well as worked with Tesla And his, I guess, yeah, his father was called the Dutchman, and he worked with the Air Force. Mark was working with the Navy before he was framed for a murder he did not commit, actually the death of a pedophile that 3 young boys committed, claiming that he was their mentor or whatever. So he was arrested and thrown in prison on false charges and has been in prison for 38 years. I'm the only journalist who has gone and gotten that story from him. I went and I did 12 interviews over a period of 5 years in person.
Yeah. So you clearly have traveled around the world to gather this information. My big question or concern for you is that I was very much the biggest fan of Project Camelot in the world. I watched you go interview Pete Peterson with Mr. David Wilcock. You helped launch his career. He teamed up with this guy, Corey Good, and they got in some trouble making up stories about blue chicken people. And I think they got addicted to the fame of conspirotainment, and they started to drift away from whistleblowers, and they started to write their own fan fiction. Corey Good said under oath, "This is part of my intellectual property. Me creating it. It means it came out of me. That is my story. It has been nowhere before. It is my intellectual property. Yes, I did make up stories about the secret space program, extrapolated off my experiences that I told you about earlier." Corey had a problem with people plagiarizing his secret space fan fiction and sued people for violation of his IP, of his fan fiction.
Yeah, and he tried to get my website taken down early on. So listen to me. Corey Good was working for the CIA. He was employed by them as an intuitive and an asset. What his contract was, I don't know, but I do have a whistleblower who extensively exposed him, did his own sort of analysis on who Corey was. Bill Ryan, I think, got to know Corey Good fairly well, my ex-partner. And I have to say that Corey Good was trying to get off the charges. So he was lying to the court and pretending that he made the whole shit up, which he did not. So the blue avians are supposed to be an ET group. Whether they are or they aren't, it really doesn't matter. But the point I'm trying to say here is that people are so fucking gullible that you think that somebody sits in a courtroom and doesn't lie, especially if they're a CIA agent and they're taught to lie since day one. All he had to do was to get off those charges was to lie and say he made it all up. Anybody can do that, okay? People that believed him, that's their problem, all right? What he was, I know for a fact that he was trying to put out real data. However, he is a complete egotist, a psycho, and he did threaten my website for using his name, which was already out there, in a post once.
So you interviewed him and then you used his name?
No,
or you just...
I never interviewed him.
Okay.
I was vetting him to decide whether to do an interview with him, and ultimately had decided not to because he had very questionable ethics and behavior.
Are government programs personal IP? If you write about government programs, is that your IP?
IP? What do you mean?
Intellectual property, like let's say,
No,
like Richard.
not necessarily. I mean, you can make up stories based on what you think is our government programs, but since they're above top secret, in theory, unless you are a whistleblower from within those programs, where you can actually be brought up on charges and even killed, it really depends on your agreement with the secret space program. I write about the secret space program all the time from a point of view of whistleblowers and then just connecting the dots.
and journalism.
That's open for journalists to, analyze and investigate.
I guess, Richard Allen Miller, our mutual friend, the reason why you're here back with me today, he was working with the government investigating high strangeness. There would be a paranormal event. They would send him in because he was a high level member of the OTO. Hey, you know a little bit of woo woo. You have some training. Can you? And what the hell happened here?
Well, he's a physicist with multiple degrees and a genius. Yes.
So they would send him in to investigate high strangeness. That became the X-Files.
Yes.
So, and they wanted him to create it, but he didn't like California, and he was very skeptical of the Hollywood apparatus,
I think he wrote a couple screenplays though for them
in early, but he didn't want to show run like they wanted him to.
Right.
I interviewed a guy called Andy Basaggio, and he had the same problem where he went down to ABC and downloaded
Andy Basiago, but yes.
But I said his name wrong. Basiago. Yes. I interviewed Andrew Basiago, very nice guy. And I listened to all of his interviews. I read all of his writings, and his story is very consistent of being a time traveling chrononaut with DARPA. And then he was in something called Project Pegasus with DARPA and the US government. That became the show Fringe. And he was very annoyed that the show Fringe stole from him because he wanted to showrun it, and ABC producers stole that from him. But I'm wondering if it's a government project, is that your IP or not? Because that came up in the Corey Good situation.
Okay. Because internet uses the word IP, I think it's very misleading. So you should just spell it out. But
and your creative intellectual property. Your creative intellectual property.
He didn't own Fringe. He didn't create Fringe. He was. There's a lot of dubious areas of Andy Basiago's story. I met him in person. We did a TV series pilot that featured him as one of the people in it. He has a certain points of view on time travel and other things, which my whistleblowers don't actually go down the same roads. So all I can tell you is that his testimony is his own testimony, but that he did not create Fringe. The military secret space program did Fringe, okay? And they also did something that's involved in another television series called Counterpart. You might have seen it. So the thing is that they went across to the parallel Earth, where you are said to have a negatively oriented double, and they brought the doubles over here for people that were dying. And that is a time travel. You could call it an experiment, except they actually did it, and with great success, as a matter of fact. And I have a time travel whistleblower who also testifies to that effect. So Basiago certainly did not create Fringe. Whether he talked to Hollywood about it and that's where they got their information, I don't know. But it was already operational within the secret space program. Parallel Earth is something that occultists know about. That's not such a big stretch if you think about it. So there's an evil Kerry Cassidy out there. There's a negative version of you out there in a parallel Earth. Well, it's not quite as straightforward as that. Apparently, it could be negative oriented. It could be sort of it's kind of like a different history. Did you watch Fringe?
Yes, I watched Fringe.
Oh, well, then why are you asking me?
Well,
because the characters, I'm saying the characters in Fringe were not necessarily bad. They had, sort of a different orientation to their way of looking at good and bad on the parallel Earth. But it is kind of like an opposite. But obviously it's not permanent. It's just, enculturation, if you will, is how you deal with light and dark and the balance. Okay, that's part of your decision making during your life. You choose, right? So you have a choice. Parallel Earth was run by more like the Nazi, where they go, the Nazis won the war and they're over in control of the humans and so on and so forth, that kind of thing.
I guess what I'm getting at, Kerry, is when you talk about giant ant people and,
Giant? They're not giant. But
when
okay.
you talk about ant people and when you have your experience with Corey Good saying that he made up stuff on the stand, and your friend who downloaded all this information about she downloaded her book about different human race
Sure.
sources, human races.
The guardian races, yes.
Are you worried that whistleblowers embellish their own stories like a narcissist would always make themselves a hero? How do you discern when people are bullshitting you for their ego, and like what's your process of verifying, and how do you stay grounded in all of this crazy high strangeness?
It's a fair question. The fact of the matter is that we all have an ability to discern the truth. This is a skill that a lot of humans have lost or not explored in their own selves. But we do have like a natural sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, Geiger counter, but it's a resonance between the heart and the mind that actually can tell you when somebody is being truthful. And we tend to resonate with people that tell the truth. Now, a lot of people have had that completely distorted, and so they follow the wrong people. They kiss the ass of the wrong people. They idolize the wrong people because their intuitive psychic abilities are deadened, sometimes by food, fluorescent lighting, bad childhoods, you can name it, like a huge litany. Part of the road to enlightenment is discerning the truth in everything all around you. That's the whole point of enlightenment. So you have to decide for yourself. I can't tell you what to think. I can tell you what I think. I can tell you what I'm getting and the testimony that I've gotten. And then you can come to your own conclusions and do your own research. So in the end of the day, sure, if you want to imagine that these people are egotists, but most of them, at least the ones I've interviewed, we have vetted and have been vetted over the years as well. And many of them risked their life, their career, their families. Some of them lost family members because the Illuminati couldn't stand the fact that they were revealing the truth. Lots of whistleblowers have been killed. Lots of my whistleblowers have been killed. So they didn't just risk their lives, they actually got killed. And I have been threatened. My life has been threatened. Back in the day, in the early days of Camelot, just when we started, they threatened our life multiple times. At one point, we were driving up a road, just to put it in the shortest way, up Grindelwald. It's this windy, treacherous road, and we were driving in this old Audi that had been checked out beforehand with a mechanic to make sure it was safe. And when we got to the top, we pulled into a parking lot and one of the wheels fell off. We took it to, one of those mechanic people, and he said it was sliced clean. So if it had happened like just 5 minutes before, while we were on the way up of this treacherous road that had huge cliffs on either side, then we probably wouldn't even be here today, or I wouldn't. So, you can make up your mind however you want. It's like everything. You can either decide the person in front of you is telling the truth or not. One of the reasons I started up interviewing people using the camera and doing 2-hour interviews when nobody else was doing that in person, going around the world, was because myself and my original partner, we decided we want to get the truth out. And I had studied filmmaking in Hollywood. I worked in Hollywood for 20 years before I did this job. And basically I knew that if I talked to people, I could probably get them to tell the truth. And indeed, that has happened. Now people won't send people to me. The military stops anyone who says yes to me to do an interview because they're afraid I'll get truth that they don't want out there. SAVIN did one interview with me online. You can watch it. And at the end of the interview, he said, I'll never do another interview with you again because you're going to make me break my security oath. I don't, I didn't try to do that. All I just do is intelligent questions, like you're trying to ask me intelligent questions. So, it's like anything in life. You have to decide if it's fake or true. And that's becoming more and more something that's going to save your life or take your life right now. If you believe the wrong people and the wrong information, you could very well die. That's how it's happening. So,
Well, yeah,
being Earth, it's so important to be able to discern the truth.
so are all of these non-human entities who work for the US government, do they demand ritual child abuse? You can't phone them up on a radio. Do they only come? Is that what they're after? You say that wars are mostly manufactured so that the aliens can take who they want off the battlefield and send them all over interstellarly to buy and sell us like a drug trade.
But war it's a mixture of things, going to war. As you may know, as a political person who is interpreting what they're doing, sometimes it's over resources, religion, you name it. So those are also factors. Those are human factors in wars on Earth. But there's another side to it that has to do with the ETs that get involved. For example, Captain Mark Richards, who has dealt with ETs extensively, he was a captain of an Enterprise type vehicle, okay, going out in the star systems. That's what the secret space program is doing. They're arguably 10,000 years in advance of us on surface Earth because they have been helped by various ETs, etc., to advance. We have bases on the moon and Mars and moons of Saturn, and we're going interstellar. I mean, it's so extensive that it's just amazing. But the bottom line is that this is what's happening, and gradually the veil is being pulled away. The truth is coming out. I've been talking about this truth for 20 years with whistleblowers. So I'm a little more advanced, I guess you might say, in my knowledge base than most. But, you can take it or leave it, whatever.
I'm just, I'm really good friends with Richard Gage. My dad almost died in 9/11. I think his version of what happened on 9/11 is true. But then you also have this Judy Wood character who comes out, and then now they smack talk each other. And it's always like, I know that the 9/11 commission is all BS, but there is infighting amongst our truth community. And so I'm just trying to discern. I don't know, I've never met an alien, so I'm just trying to discern. My only frame of reference is that the Mayans would developed a way of communicating with the aliens, and their priests, who could have been 20 feet tall or 9 feet tall, demanded sacrifice, and then they killed all their own people sacrificing for the entities. We know that.
Yeah, you can see that human sacrifice has been a thread going throughout human history. But ultimately, I would say it came from the aliens, okay, from the reptilians that are very much involved in that. The bottom line is that, this is a very complex world, but nonetheless, there are some basics that you can understand. Eventually what you do is you kind of create an ability to discern the truth. It gets better and better the more you exercise it. And by the way, you would not know if you'd met an alien or not. The fact is, you could have easily met aliens. And by the way, we're all alien human hybrids anyway. But to use it in your terminology, sure. Do you remote view? Do you know remote viewers?
I always have crazy dreams. One of your whistleblowers that I became very, very good friends with is James Robert Wright, who worked for the Dallas Scottish Rite. And he would always download to me all sorts of esoteric knowledge about the Freemasons and what goes on in the Dallas Freemasonic building. And he claimed to be a trained remote viewer. So yeah, that he would he's a big whistleblower for me, just in general, about how the Zapruder film lived in the Dallas Scottish Rite building, and how the CIA is very into Freemasons who can channel things, and they really believe in remote viewing. So that's my reference to that.
Well, the reason I brought that up is that, there's a group called farsight.org, and you should also, go to my Telegram and read my articles on Substack. So I have a website called projectcamelotportal.com. All my latest videos are on Rumble. I have a ton from the past when I was banned from YouTube that are on Odyssey, and we're trying to move them over to Rumble because Rumble's a better platform, but we're still in the process. And I have a Telegram channel I post at every single day, not necessarily things I believe, but things that I think are worth knowing. And what can I say? There's so much out there, and you have one person that you think gave you some truth. But let me tell you that that particular person is also, and I think he agrees, has been heavily tortured and mind controlled.
100%.
So you can't know that everything he's telling you is true necessarily. I'm sure a lot of it is. He's going to have a lot of knowledge, but imagine talking to, military whistleblowers for 20 years.
No,
that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, and that's why I'm talking to you. What's going on with 3-1 Atlas? NASA says it's a comet shooting through the atmosphere. But Heaven's Gate members thought the Halley-Bopp comet was a spacecraft, so they shaved their head and killed themselves with nice Nikes on. What is the 3I Atlas comet?
Okay, well, first of all, right now, scientists are completely obsessed with it. And there is a scientist who I guess he's a Harvard scientist who was involved in the Galileo project, called Avi Loeb, who regularly reports on 3I Atlas. And there are other scientists out there that have also been reporting similar or the exact same things, as well as NASA, when they will tell you the truth. But never a straight answer is usually what you get from NASA. So the thing is, there's heavy secrecy around 3I Atlas. You have to think to yourself, well, if it was no big deal, then why all the secrecy? So it's obvious that they are trying to hide a great deal. I've got several whistleblowers who are sources, even that never came forward to the public, that have basically gone to ground, as we say. They've stopped communicating ever since July, when 3I Atlas came to the fore. They're keeping a lid on it. And Richard C. Hoagland, who's the former NASA scientist, has a news group. I was part of it for a while until he started insulting me. But anyway, he is basically reporting what he can, but they've kept him off the air on his own radio show now since July. And he's got, proof of that. He's tried to sue the city or whatever the hell, because they won't let him speak to the public, ostensibly. All right. So all I can tell you is there's a great deal about it. I've done lots of shows on it. So you can definitely go on my website, put in 3I Atlas. You can also go to my Substack and do the same thing and do a search and see all my articles and all my videos. I interviewed a person called David Sereda in the early days of I think it was August or end of August, starting in August. And he is basically, I think of him as an idiot savant. He's a very well-educated, I think he went to Berkeley. He was brought into the secret space community to a degree. He's now working with Richard C. Hoagland. They have put together a sort of a picture of our, solar system as they see it. And he's positing the idea of a hyperdimensional solar system in which each planet has its own hyperdimensional double, so to speak, a little like Earth and parallel Earth, if you will. But nonetheless, This, all of that information it's like so much more than I have time to talk about here. But suffice to say that myself and a well-known psychic called Sebastian Martin, who I interviewed many years ago, who eventually went to work at least as a CIA asset remote viewer and has been considered to have a good track record in that regard, as well as Simon Parks, who is also a trained remote viewer, agree with my assessment. I believe that Three Eye Atlas is an Anunnaki craft, that we actually called it in from the Anunnaki that are based in Israel, underground in Dimona. And I believe it's here to be a precursor to something that's following. I got that information from James of the Wingmakers, who I'm still in touch with. And the wingmakers.com is a multimedia website that depicts a story. Originally, the main book that generated it was called The Ancient Arrow Project, and it's written by a guy who called himself James. And then there are these interviews with James called the Neruda interviews, in which he talks about going on the run from the ACIO, which is an actual organization that's part of the secret space collection of organizations. And they consider themselves in charge of the alien question, if you will, for Earth, kind of like a small segment of Majestic 12, if you remember that group, which is much more than 12 members. So what we're talking about here is a whole litany of information that was that came out of the ACIO, packaged into a fictional story on a website called wingmakers.com, where you can go and read the books and the interviews and come to your own conclusions. But the bottom theme of that was that the Wingmakers were part of the group that created the human genome, if you will, and that they have an installation, if you want to call it, in Chaco Canyon in New Mexico that you can actually go to. It's a real place. And it extrapolates from there what goes on with them. But the bottom line is that they predict that we're going to be invaded by a race of androids sometime during these years, and that actually that invasion may have already started. Recently, when Three Eye Atlas hit the scene, I wrote to James, who I'm still in touch with, asked him if he thought Three Eye Atlas was part of that invasion, and he said no, but it's a precursor. That's the way he put it. That's all he would tell me. Mark Richards, Captain Mark Richards, the one I interviewed with 12 interviews over a period of 5 years, wouldn't tell me anything about Three Eye Atlas for months. And then all of a sudden, in one span of one text, it's this prison internet texting system that you can join if you pay money with prisoners. He said in a statement, he said, it's not a threat, but we're going to use all possible force, which is basically covering his ass in the first part of the sentence, and second part telling you the real nitty gritty, because he's a captain of an Enterprise space, fleet, and he wouldn't talk like that unless it was serious. So he was basically giving me a message. I posted it on the internet, and since then he's gone silent and I can't reach him. I don't know if they killed him. I don't know if he's still alive. I just don't know.
Do you think that's a Anunnaki-led drone warfare spaceship, Three Eye Atlas?
I'm sorry, you put a word in there, a drone. What are you talking about?
You said a drone, or that's no. It's a kickoff of World War III. Is that? No. Three Eye Atlas is an Anunnaki craft. Right.
That is.
It was summoned here.
I think it's driven by an android, that it contains reptilians and humanoids, that one of the top remote viewers that works with Courtney Brown and Farsight, who has an excellent remote viewing track record, remote viewed it and came to the same conclusion I did. okay, which it contains reptilians and certain other grays and so on and so forth, that it is, I think this is basically a sort of a surveillance vehicle that was here to kickstart their presence, to re-familiarize us with Anu and who prefers to rule over us. It's like it's come into our solar system to stimulate certain activities, let's say, but it's not an attack craft, or although it is equipped to be one.
So does that coincide with Trump's July 8th, 2026 speech that he's going to announce their presence?
It's possible. Right now, it's no longer close to Earth. It's over by Jupiter, and in theory, on the way out of our solar system. So whether Trump's statement is coming from the presence of Three-Eye Atlas and whether it will contain any truth at all regarding Three-Eye Atlas, I have no idea. At the moment, there's been nothing but secrecy surrounding Three-Eye Atlas, but there's a great deal of evidence that scientists, real scientists, have basically come forward with, that have to admit, including Richard C. Hoagland, this is a craft. It has an objective. It actually, when it went through our solar system, David Sereda, the astronomer, who's quite brilliant, tracked it, and every single place that it was going related to our history in the past. And therefore, it had sort of, you can say, an oblique message along with each place that it went, including the message that it is, run by kings and that they're still in control and all of this kind of nonsense.
Mm. They're doing their own version of the Q for communications to the insiders. There's a lot of talk about ICE agents enforcing our borders against illegal aliens. My last podcast was with Craig Pasta Jardula. He went up to Minneapolis to talk to the protesters of the ICE agents. You came up with a very different take on what's going on with ICE. You say, the real objective of this stupid, insane exercise has been to allow illegals into our country to gather all the illegals coming from Central and South America who are alien human hybrids created by the gray ETs who are conducting a massive genetic engineering exercise since the 1950s. With permission by our American government, secret space program, and or Bush Sr. These alien human hybrid, gray human hybrid with X-Men type abilities and skill sets that are going to be very useful in the future to fight the coming war of the worlds when we are invaded by an army of androids run by off-planet AI, a war that is very close at hand. Three-Eye Atlas is simply advanced team for this coming invasion.
Yeah, that's approximately correct. So the thing is that ICE, okay, well, it's more involved than most people will probably know. But if you followed Q, you will know that the Biden show, I call it the Biden show, the 4 years of supposedly Biden being a president, he was executed prior to that. I think it's starting to come out in the Epstein files, by the way. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the bottom line is that the White Hats executed him as a person who was a violator of humanity for his pedophilia. And so then they had to pretend that he won an election that he did not win, which is also stolen on his behalf. And so ever since then, he's been played, according to 107, by 5 actors. Okay.
There was a rumor that Jim Carrey was one of those actors.
Yes, that's correct. And it's very possible. So I'm not sure. But this is the precursor to understanding what is going on right now with ICE, because during that time, there were a lot of things that, even though supposedly there was the Biden show running our country, they weren't really. It was really China and MI6 and another group of a few other countries that colluded to steal our 2020 election and give it to Biden Biden was killed right before his inauguration. It was a funeral. He was given a military funeral. That's why the military, did certain things and not others. And Derek Johnson is an expert on all military, signs and signals.
Procedures.
Everything. Yeah. He's out there if you want to listen to his, him explain how that was a military funeral you saw, not an inauguration of a president. Trump was resworn in as commander in chief, I was told by 107 in March of 2021. So just like a month or two after the actual inauguration, which is like January 21st. So what happens is then they had to pretend through this auto pen that Biden was making decisions, even though it was actors. But at the same time, it appears that there was like a tug of war over the Biden doll, if you will, and that some of the time he was controlled and taken control over by the black magicians that are part of the dark side Illuminati. So he wasn't always operated by the white hats, is my understanding. But maybe most of the time, maybe some of the time, they were definitely in control of the Biden doll. And a lot of the decisions that were signed into law, whatever he did, is all bullshit. And basically, Trump was in control. So what happened behind the scenes was there was something that was obvious, and that was the border was open. This is my point of view, okay? The way that I've studied white hat operations for as long as I have known about them, which goes back to 2010 and before. And my understanding is that they actually left the border open to allow for the invasion of the illegal, the military-aged men who didn't just come from Central and South America, but also came from China, from the Philippines, from Cuba, et cetera, but they're all military-aged, and that they had come to infiltrate our country. But the way the white hats think about things, they use an AI. They use generals. They have a bunch of generals on their side. They have psychic intuitives like myself and remote viewers. So with that package, it's not just Trump operating by himself that gets all the blame for everything. But anyway, the bottom line is that they decided to use that because this gets back to the X-Men. Okay, so I explain. I don't know why people are just not like super aware of the gray human hybrid abduction program, because there were so many abduction witnesses over the years that came forward with stories of being abducted, genetically messed with by the aliens, the gray aliens. Well, the story there is that the grays made a deal with our government, and this comes from Dan Burish on an interview I did with Dan many years ago, back 2005 or 6 at the most, probably, where he told us that this agreement, this deal was made. And the deal was for our military to allow the Greys to have free reign with South America, Central and South America, to do their abduction genetic hybrid program, but that they would more or less leave humans in America alone after they'd been operational for years. And the thing is that it does appear that that did happen, but the Greys break treaties all the time. So they didn't just keep their operations south of the border, but the major amount of that and the story behind it was put into a movie called Logan, about a young girl from South America, or Mexico, I think, and how she was in that program and so on and so forth. And she has super soldier, some abilities as a super soldier and so on. So if you know that, then you also know that we may have an invasion coming, and we don't have a big enough military to fight off, at least on the ground, with soldiers, okay? Then if you're intelligent, you might think, well, we could turn them, we could mind control them back to our side of things, right? Rather than have them be our enemies. The gray human hybrids, certain of the the grays are what you call positive towards humanity, and some are negative. So it's the negative grays that orchestrated this human abduction program, supposedly to rectify their DNA, in which what they had done with their genome is remove their emotionality, which not only made them dumber, in my opinion, but also made them look horrible. Their skin's all dried out. They look dreadful. Okay. So they don't have soft, pretty skin like we do and that kind of thing. So that's because they lost their the water emotion, right, from their genome, because they were emphasizing intelligence over emotion. Whereas at the moment, humans have a balance. All right.
So can I just summarize? So the gray aliens would abduct people from Central and South America to give our military advanced technology, but now but they would not just capture them; they would instill genes with them. They would make them human gray hybrids. They would release them back to Central America, and when the border was open, they would flood in, and we monitored how many human gray hybrids flooded back into the United States
because the
during Biden's
border
reign.
The border has a frequency fence that was put in place a long time ago. So all you have to do is walk across it, and it's reading your DNA, et cetera, the way the aliens do, by the way.
Your biometrics.
So yes. And so what happens is, this is my theory. There is some reasons why I hold this belief, okay? One of them is that there have been camps found in places like Texas where a lot of, let's say, Chinese or other cultures, troops seem to be operational and being trained, okay? And there was also a bunch of them coming in from Canada and training camps in Canada as well. So it does appear, and I have actually military whistleblowers who came to me when I put out the call for a military who would remember what happened in Vietnam and other sort of secret things going on in the military. And one or a couple of them came to me and said that they had been in training programs, this specifically, I think, around the Georgia area. I don't know the name of the base, where they were being trained to fight aliens. Anyway, these are just random things. What I do is connect the dots.
Pieces of the puzzle.
It made sense to me looking at the X-Men movies, because Hollywood is, of course, part of the deep state and always has been, and has been telegraphing a certain amount of truth to humans, okay, as part of their deal. So they tell us the truth, but then they put it in a movie. So then you'll say, oh, that's just a movie, instead of knowing that that's actually being the truth. So that happens all the time.
Predictive programming.
X-Men was a sort of wake-up call that this program has been quite successful, which it has. And now all of those gray human hybrids swarming our border. Ever since 2016, when Trump ran that first time, there was an unbelievable onslaught of humans coming, massive amounts, just walking to our border, just like mind controlled. They even filmed them, and they acted mind controlled. And they were just coming to our border because that's where they were being sent, because grays can mind control you by the group. And this is in the Whitley Strieber books, one in particular called The Grays, which I highly recommend. So this was written, many years ago. I read it, and I knew instantly that he was right. They are able to mind control groups of humans to, act like zombies or do whatever they want.
So is part of all of this immigration that's going on right now, where Palestinians are moving to France, and Somalis are moving to Minnesota, and Indians are moving to England, and Irish people are becoming a minority in their own country? Is that's part of muddying the water? The grays are muddying the water to prime those cultures to
Well,
So
they're
for
no,
gray
they're the
invasion?
very high level, beings, humans and aliens working together are changing our genome, and they are orchestrating these mass migrations into certain areas and out of certain other areas, and they're mixing. So if they take the way they did with Ukraine, so Ukraine is a mass migration program in part to bring whites, so with the white genome, back into Britain, because Britain has almost no white people, because most of their original genome, the white Anglo-Saxon, whatever you want to call, have died out. And then they brought in a bunch of beings with brown skin from India and Africa and wherever else. And then so much so that now they will, they look almost Arab. But now they brought in the Ukrainians to rebalance their genetic, this was always the plan. So they created a war with Ukraine, which was useful for many other purposes, like experimentation on the Slavic peoples of the Ukraine, because they were, for one thing, they couldn't be taken over by COVID as easily. So they had certain things in their genome that the Brits wanted. So there was a reason why the countries got together and decided, let's do a war in Ukraine. Aside from the biolabs that were there experimenting on, like I say, the Slavic people. I mean, I'm putting a ton of stuff in this short interview, but actually it's gone on quite a while. I think maybe we should try to wind it up. I don't know how long it is at this point, but
I know.
I don't want to confuse people by putting so much in, all together, because
Maybe we could have just talked about JUAN SAVIN and been easier. I know I wrote 6 pages of questions. It's been 11 years since the last time I interviewed you. So I wanted to, I have all these curiosities myself.
Well, we can do more than one interview. You can interview me in the future. I'm just saying, I think maybe we're
cooked on this one. Okay. Well, I took you as I got through 5.5 pages out of 6 or so that I wanted. So maybe I gotta have you back. I hope now that because you told me you get 700 emails. So hopefully now when mine comes around, you know who the hell I am. The last time we talked, I remember we were talking about Neil Keenan and Klaus Schwab, this character. By the way, Matt Baker gave me this shirt of InfoWars. But anyway, thanks, Kerry Cassidy. Hopefully it's not such a long time between visits. Your website is Project Camelot .tv, I believe. .tv. Yes.
Well,
Project Camelot.
Project Camelot.tv, projectcamelotportal.com, or projectcamelot.org. Those all go to the same place because we're banned in some countries.
She's an OG. She was going up high level from a production coordinator. She was frustrated with how desperately slow movies take, and how she ran into a glass ceiling. So out of hubris and desperation,
I wasn't a production coordinator, so I don't know where that comes from.
Oh, you were in the film business.
Yeah, well,
production management
and jobs. Yeah, I did work in production and development.
Me too. I worked in reality shows for 6 years, and I reached a level where if I'm not going to join any square and compass organizations, I kind of hit a glass ceiling, which I was completely unwilling to do so because I read William Schneblin's book Masonry Behind the Light, and I got drunk at an after party one time, and I told them they were all creeps, and I didn't know they were all Masons. But anyway. So I've been like, oh, well, I'm not joining your creepy club because I know it's just you're going to ritualistically sin and lose the reason why you got into this for creative endeavor. But you took a commercial grade camera in your own hands. You went around, you didn't make excuses, and you built yourself a career. And you taught everyone in the early days of the internet how to podcast, how to whistleblow. And, and I really appreciate, what you've done. I'm still, maybe my mind is cooked on mainstream news or whatever. And I'm trying to, learn from you. It's a slow process because your worldview is so different than mine. I hope I gave you, I didn't, when I brought up the Corey Good situation, I didn't want to confront you with it, but it's like, there have been people, like there's a lot of infighting in the whistleblowing arena. And, Michael Aquino was interviewed by what's his name, Greg Carlwood of the Higher Side Chats, and he was just telling narcissistic hero stories about himself. If I interviewed him, that would have been very different, but he would have probably hung up in 5 minutes. So it's like there's a lot of good guys and bad guys that come across, and it's a very dangerous territory. But when you get into all these different races, it just blows my mind where this information is coming from. So, but I really appreciate you. And I we can all criticize the content that comes out, but you have done all the legwork, so I see the effort and the hustle and the genuine, dedicate, the service to humanity that you have provided. And I really appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Hopefully you're not a stranger around here for too much longer. Thanks, Kerry Cassidy. This has been Highway Diary episode 437. Bye, everybody.